Last time, on plagues, prophets, war, and peace, we saw all of Israel and a mixed crowd of non-Israelites hurriedly leave Egypt. In a final act of wrathful defiance, Pharaoh sends his finest charioteers for a lightning attack on Israel. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses,
"Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness."
But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." Moses, the now truly inspirational leader, is given the big picture and has the relationship with God to look past the immediate fears of this impossible situation and look upwards to Him. But even Moses, in the midst of calamity, was occasionally overwhelmed by the unexpected, which took his focus off God. Moses starts crying out in prayer.
"Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. But you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites may go into the sea on dry ground. Then I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and so I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his chariots and his chariot drivers. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained glory for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his chariot drivers."
The angel of God who was going before the Israelite army moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel. And so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. One did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. As they walked through the seabed on dry ground, looking to their left and right, seeing a wall of water hundreds of feet high, held up by an invisible force completely against the normal laws of nature, they could only praise God in awe and wonder and hurry along on dry ground in trust and faith into a new life and adventure that awaited them on the other side. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud looked down upon the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into panic. He clogged their chariot wheels so that they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said,
"Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt."
Then the Lord said to Moses,
"Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and chariot drivers."
So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work that the Lord did against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. When nearly 40 years before, the younger Moses fled from a wrathful Pharaoh, Thutmose III, father of Amenhotep II, he traversed around the top right of the Sinai Peninsula, then southeast into the land of Midian, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia. It is here where years later Moses received the 10 Commandments on the mountain of God, Mount Sinai. Now that all the Israelites had fled the clutches of the son of Thutmose III, their backs were well and truly against the wall. Looking behind, they saw the chariots of Pharaoh lined up like a pack of wolves ready to devour. Turning in front of them, they saw the sea, the Gulf of Aqaba. Then, with a truly jaw-dropping miracle, God divided the waters so that 4 million people did the impossible. They walked on dry ground through the Gulf of Aqaba, free at last from Pharaoh's slavery. But have you ever considered the exact location of this miraculous crossing, or has this been forever lost to time? One view is that it occurred at the Straits of Tiran, which is on the eastern side of the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. Today, this is a popular tourist area famed for its coral reefs and diving. However, topographical charts show that if all the water was removed, it plunges over 1,000 feet down jagged coral reefs at a gradient far too steep for millions of people to clamber down. Bear in mind, this was not a population made up of experienced mountaineers equipped with pickaxe and climbing ropes. Much of the population consisted of children, the elderly and women, some of whom would have been pregnant. Wherever the Red Sea crossing took place, it would have to have been easily negotiated by people of all strengths and abilities. In other words, an easy walk was vital. So with the Straits of Tiran ruled out, where else could it be? If we head northwards along the eastern coast of the Sinai Peninsula, we come across the Nuweiba Peninsula, essentially a bulging beach. It is a large flat area extending 3.5 kilometers straight out into the Gulf, and is certainly large enough to hold around 4 million people. With the water removed, the topography slopes gently downwards at a gradient of 5%, going down to 2,500 feet below sea level and then back up. The distance from Nuweiba Beach across the Gulf of Aqaba is about 17 kilometers, which could be crossed in a little over 3 hours. People of all abilities and ages could make this crossing. With all the water miraculously removed and the silt from the sea floor dried, it becomes an ideal crossing point. All the more so considering that only a short distance north or south of the Nuweiba crossing point, the sea floor falls away steeply, creating deep ravines, which would be impossible to navigate. As though to firmly close the lid shut on any doubt as to the location of the Exodus crossing, peripheral discoveries stack up to what is definitive proof. The first discovery is the case of the twin pillars. At Nuweiba Beach, there is a granite pillar, 4.7 meters high, recorded as being erected by King Solomon to mark and commemorate the Exodus crossing point. On the Saudi Arabian side of the Gulf of Aqaba, there used to be the pillar's twin, seen and documented by the explorer Ron Wyatt in 1978. However, sometime later, the Saudi government removed the pillar. The second discovery occurred in 1997 when divers around Nuweiba reported odd shapes of liberally scattered coral, some looking like wheels. Shortly afterwards, a Swedish explorer by the name of Lennart Muller conducted extensive robotic studies, filming the seabed in the area between Nuweiba and Saraf al-Baal. He made some truly remarkable discoveries. Before we examine what he found, we need to understand one fact. Coral growth on sand or silt is limited. It much prefers to form around a solid object. This is why some conservationists have used decommissioned, sterilized, sunken tanks to create an artificial reef. When the object has corroded or rotted away, the coral retains the original shape of the host. North and south of Nuweiba, coral reefs are large, extensive masses, perfectly natural in appearance. However, at Nuweiba, they are scattered randomly and are small in size. Divers familiar with the area have compared the distribution of this coral to a junkyard. This is not how coral reefs normally appear. What excites the interest is that in many instances, 90-degree angles have been found, indicative of man-made objects. One of the best examples appears like an axle standing upright, with intact wheels at each end. Some look like spoke hubs. Others are so artificial looking that the number of spokes can be counted. These match the designs of wheels perfectly preserved in some Egyptian tombs and pictured in hieroglyphs. It is by no means a small stretch to see that this coral, shaped unlike any other in the world, formed on the destroyed chariots as they and their riders were wrecked when the wall of water crashed back at God's command and then sank to the bottom. Like all things, even with persuasive evidence, some people still will not believe. However, as multidisciplinary proofs stack up, what will be your response as God knocks at the door of your heart? So now, the Israelites were finally free. With their captors utterly ruined, they could look ahead to an unknown but exciting future. Without doubt, this description-defying Yehovah, who had led them so tenderly with indescribable acts of power, would continue to protect, guide, and provide. But their freedom was not untethered without boundaries. As a loving parent limits the activities of a child to prevent harm, so loving freedom also has restrictions. Whilst the shackles of oppression were indeed burst, God would require them to exhibit obedience to His commands, every single one given for their good, spiritually, physically, relationally, even commercially. And this would transcend through family relationships all the way to God as their King and Commander-in-Chief. They had been slaves to a tyrannical dictator, now they would be led by the King of Righteousness. And through gradual incremental transformation, God's plan was for Israel to become a light to the world. But how could the law provide freedom? A 2015 survey of 1,000 formerly trafficked people revealed that 60% had depression and nearly 50% had PTSD. With basic daily decisions made for them such as food, shelter, and labor when freedom was gained, many were paralyzed by choice which seemed alien and overwhelming. Severe self-respect and trust issues would surface to the point where some would even voluntarily return to slavery. It now becomes clear why God prohibited certain forks in the road to the newly emancipated Israel. They would too easily choose to return to their captors. When God gave the law through Moses, Israel was only 50 days out of generational forced labor. This gave them a clear path forwards, enabling them to build a societal structure comprised of God's standards of moral and spiritual laws. Laws which underpin all of Western civilization and are still as relevant today. Israel's journey would at times be smooth, at other times rocky. They would learn the consequence of both obedience and rebellion. Traps and snares would litter the path, which they would fall into every time they took their eyes off God. Knowing that by themselves Israel would not be able to chart the right heading through this vast sea of possibility, He would regularly intervene by providing true prophets to steer, guide, and correct, sometimes heeded, more frequently ignored. Despite regular episodes of intrigue, error, and rebellion, often descending into a chicanery of human politics, God's plan would not be thwarted as He forged His ultimate purpose, gifting the world with a child from a forgotten Judean backwater who grew up to become Rabbi of Rabbis, miracle worker, and fulfiller of much ancient prophecy. His short ministry would last only 3.5 years, yet unrecognizably change the world forever. In the next series, Prophets, which will be released in 2027, we will look at the relentless interventions of God to direct His fledgling Israel. We will also see indisputable evidence for the divine to wake up even the most ardent of atheists. This will demonstrate the reality of the supernatural and of a benevolent, loving, personal, all-powerful God.